I want to talk about belief systems, especially the psychological aspects of belief. Um, People believe in so many different things, in God or gods, the afterlife, astrology, homeopathy, UFOs, Bigfoot, whatever. And people usually hold on to these beliefs, even though they don't have really much proof or evidence for it. So why is that so? First of all, belief systems are not just intellectual, but they do have a strong emotional component. So, because of these emotions, we hold on to beliefs. Imagine a belief system like a little tree that you want to plant in the garden. So the things that are above ground level, the trunk and the branches, represent the intellectual component, and that which goes below ground, the roots, represent the emotional part. So as soon as you plant this tree, as soon as the roots take hold in the ground, the tree becomes immovable. And it's very much like that with beliefs. Uh, the emotional roots of the belief hold the belief system in place. When our beliefs are challenged, usually we experience some kind of unpleasant emotion, which is called cognitive dissonance in psychology. It's a feeling of internal inconsistency, and very often we want this feeling to go away as quickly as possible. And therefore we uh, almost immediately automatically try to explain the other arguments away. Uh, the emotional mix of uh, the mix of feelings that are involved in our belief systems often can even be contradictory. That means there can be opposing feelings that are mixed together and that we still believe to be true. Belief systems basically uh, are everything that we find normal. They're not only related to spiritual questions, but also to questions about our society. Um, for example, what kind of government we find the best, or uh, for example, what kind of educational system is best. Speaking of that, for example, some people believe that it is a loving thing to use corporal punishment to discipline children, although inflicting physical harm to someone is never a loving thing. And so that's a contradiction by itself. There's something unloving that is, on the other hand, called love, and people would still believe that. Even the children who are affected in this way would then hold on to these beliefs. They would justify the actions of the parents because we have a tendency to idealize our parents, and therefore justifications are uh, brought forth like they had only the best interest in mind and so on. And one emotional reason is why people hold on to this, because they want to suppress an even more painful emotion, the more painful emotion that the parents at one time uh, did some unloving thing to them. So emotions can be contradictory. Emotions uh, that make up belief systems can be emotions that we want to hold on to and emotions that we want to suppress. Speaking of that example with the corporal punishment, once such a belief that this is normal is established, it can also affect other beliefs. For example, such people then are more likely ready to accept the religious concept of a punishing Father God. Such people would less likely see a contradiction in that. So let's move to another example, a religious example. Let's say when we have a religious fundamentalist who takes the Bible literally, who rejects evolution because he believes in the literal Genesis story. What kind of beliefs does such a person have, and what kind of emotions. There are a lot of fears in such a person. First of all, there's fear of hellfire and punishment, and there are also fears related to people. Um, if they would criticize or object anything in the religion, they fear that they would be judged by other people, that they would be excommunicated or shunned. They would be called perhaps immoral or evil by other people in their community. So there are a lot of fears, and as always, people try to suppress unpleasant emotions, and this is done by putting other feelings, more pleasant feelings, on top of the unpleasant ones. So emotions can come in layers, with some unpleasant emotions in the bottom, which are kept inside, and more pleasant emotions are put on top of them, so that the unpleasant emotions are not felt. So the more pleasant emotions in case of the religious person are the belief that they will be saved, so the belief in the salvation story, which is tied, of course, to the belief in Jesus and the Bible. And also positive emotions are added when they conform to the religion. They are getting the approval of their community. And so there's a big mixture of different emotions, and they root the belief system very firmly in place. So when somebody wants to convince such a literalist believer, for example, that evolution is true, this becomes a very difficult thing, because all intellectual arguments just bounce off of such persons. So in order to bring about some change in the mindset, it would be important to address the emotional components. Without a change in the feelings in such a person, such a strong believer just wouldn't be ready to change his mind. So sometimes in religious arguments, there's they're speaking about logical fallacies, and one such fallacy is called appeal to emotions. Now, if somebody appeals to emotions, that might not be logical. However, religion itself uses emotions to indoctrinate people. And so if somebody wants to be healed, so to say, from such indoctrination, then the appeal to emotion is even necessary. Something has to be stirred up, so that there's an emotional change, so that for these people it just doesn't feel that right anymore. So one could say, if religion is the poison, then appealing to emotions is part of the antidote. Let's look at the other end of the spectrum, materialists and militant atheists. People often had negative emotions in their childhood regarding organized religions. They were perhaps forced to go to church, they were coerced into a religion to follow the strict rules or whatever. They were scolded and punished. And also later people see, of course, the harm that is created in this world through fundamentalist religions. And so materialists often have a very strong negative emotions towards religions. And then what happens? People like to hold on then to the scientific, materialistic, naturalistic view, not allowing any kind of spiritual claims, because it just feels safer to stick to the materialistic explanation. So notice the wording, it feels safe, because everything that sounds spiritual could potentially, in their mind, support religions, and could make such violent religions become stronger, and that there is a fear connected to that. And so whenever such a claim comes up, for example, near-death experiences or mediumistic experiments, even though such things do not necessarily support the religions. For materialists, they just look too much religious, and therefore immediately these claims are rejected, often even without thinking deeply about them. Because when we would think about what such claims often say, then they would not so much support the religions, but rather disprove them, because usually there's no fire and brimstone kind of scenario in near-death experiences and so on. So to sum it up, it is always easy to criticize another person's belief, but it is usually difficult to challenge one's own beliefs because of the emotions that we attach to them. Often we are not even aware how strong our emotions are, because we usually immediately try to reject claims that do not conform to our beliefs, and even these emotions that do not even really come up. They would only come up if we would kind of follow up the feelings, if we would think into it and feel into it, whether there could be something true in the claim of the other person. Only then we would become aware how strong our emotions are regarding a belief. So then how to find truth? Now, first of all, it is not a good idea, of course, to just believe everything that some supposed authority says, but instead we should use logic and reason, and also look always for evidence. We should have a good balance between open-mindedness and skepticism. We should question everything, not just take anything on blind belief, but we should also not be too closed if we hear something new, but rather investigate. It is a good idea, for example, if a materialist hears about near-death experiences and he wants to reject these things immediately, uh, why not look into both sides, see the arguments for it and against it. Perhaps there might be evidence that is convincing, and so then we would have an open mind to really sincerely investigate, and that is what we would do if we would really search for truth. But it involves always to also challenge the own emotions, um, to challenge what we want to believe, what we want to hold on to. So I guess this is enough for now. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye. See you next time.